Maiden cane. Nowadays, the memory starts like this. There's a rush in the red dirt, and you and your brother snatch up the tackle box and run from the girl. She flings her fishing pole at you and yells that her daddy will just buy her another tackle box, and another, and another. The girl's echoes follow you along the riverbank. The river is green and appears desolate. No motorboats, no fishermen, no teenagers cannonballing, no herons stretching, no feral cats pawing the muck for crayfish, frogs, or mice, which only sharpens the sounds, the orchestra of insects, the whistles of birds, the girl's fading echoes, your steady breath. Your and your brother's white t-shirts are smeared with mud, and he has a cassette tape in the back pocket of his jean shorts. You wish you could remember the songs he liked. There's only this Saturday left, and you two are only a day from losing one another. You remember the red riverbank and the sagging dock jutting into the water, and how later that afternoon a dirty fishing hook snagged your thumb, and you imagine how the girl would have laughed because you stole it from her, and the snag was deep and bloody. You remember that you both caught a fish and brought them home. Your mother spread newspaper over the kitchen table and began to clean the fish while your father sat outside on the porch chopping potatoes. You and your brother sat next to your mother at the table, but every few minutes he jumped from his chair to rewind a cassette tape to the start of the song he liked most. He had borrowed the tape from a school friend. You didn't really understand the song, but you admired so much how easily your brother had learned it, how he mouthed it aggressively, as if he could will the people around him, the whole house, to match the song's exuberance. Your mother chopped off the heads of both fish and then started to cut one open along its belly, but suddenly stopped and just stared at the mess she'd made soaking into the newspaper. Your daddy came in from the porch with a plastic bowl filled with the chunks of potatoes and stared at her. She asked him to help her, and he said he didn't know how to clean fish. Your mother started to cry, and your father just stood there, hunched over, as if he might fall at any minute. And only now do you get that they felt guilty, because this was your last supper together, and they couldn't even get this right. The song playing on the stereo descended into a garbled moan as the cassette player began to eat the tape, and your brother sprung from his seat, but your father was quicker. He yanked out the cassette, its tape snapping and trailing from it like spilled entrails, and he flung the cassette onto the table where it slid into the fish heads. All fell quiet, even your mother. To break the silence, you lifted your snagged thumb for them both to see. It had started to sting sharply, and your flesh was red and angry. Your parents bickered about what to do with you, complaining because they feared you'd get tetanus and you couldn't really afford the shot. That's not who you were back then, a person who could afford tetanus shots willy-nilly. In the end, you piled into your father's truck and they all took you to get the shot. It was only later, back at home, while your daddy wrapped up the mess of a fish and took it away, that your mother explained to you and your brother what was happening as she uselessly rewound the tape back into the cassette with a pencil. She and your brother were taking a long trip, but you were staying with your daddy. After, your mother disappeared into her bedroom and your father to the front porch while your brother microwaved canned pasta for you both to eat for dinner. That night, you and your brother made plans to run away, but your father stayed awake all night watching loud war movies on the television, only falling into his usual snore at 7 a.m. when your mother awoke, as if they anticipated your plans and coordinated a watch schedule. A few hours later, your brother and mother boarded a westbound Greyhound bus leaving Florida for good. The details of those 24 hours stick with you like bread caked to the roof of your mouth, like fat in your arteries, like dirt under your fingernails. You are the trees that day, deep green and drooping with humidity. You are your brother's sneakers in the red dirt and the rubber band he used to tie his dreadlocks back. You are the girl on the dock and the snagged hook in your finger. You are the pencil your mother used to wind up the cassette. And you are the scar your daddy got the next day from slamming the metal screen door on his ankle after they left. The ankle of a man who only knew how to love one person at a time. Your mother chose you for him and took herself and your brother out of the equation to make it easier. All of this and what you'll remember most is the girl in the dock, from the scab on her elbow to the purple galoshes that her sister passed down to her. Of course, that is the past. You don't know your brother anymore, and the girl on the dock is dead. You live in Baltimore now. You've got 2 dogs and a sleeve of tattoos on your left arm. You're contemplating one on your right. Your boyfriend wishes you wouldn't do it, but your girlfriend is encouraging. The girlfriend knows about the boyfriend, but he doesn't know about her. Your brother lives in Wisconsin. From time to time, you call the number your mother sent you, but the phone just rings, and there is no voicemail. If he calls you, you don't know. He's never left a message. You're one of those people who doesn't own a cell phone, just a landline, which your boyfriend finds endearing and your girlfriend is on the fence about. Your boss has threatened to fire you if you don't get a cell phone, but you always show up when you say you will. And if he calls any one of the bars or restaurants that he owns and that you manage, he'll find you there, or you'll return his call in 15. You spend your day with the type of people your mother would hate. People who chose the service industry willingly and not out of necessity. Since you are a manager, you feel it isn't quite the same and you haven't disappointed her. You wear a wooden rosary she once sent you around your right wrist. The small cross clicks around against tumblers of whiskey and glass bowls filled with fresh herbs as you craft drinks. Sometimes restaurants that do not belong to your boss invite you to create their seasonal cocktail menus, and you say sure, but you keep it under the table. You don't have a do not complete clause, but still. Your father once said that black people in red cars only attract bad attention, and you should never buy one. You never bought a car at all, sticking to a motorcycle. Once a year, you have to remind yourself that your father is still alive, and you call him. The conversations are pleasant and last a few hours. You cover politics and recipes and your boyfriend and your girlfriend, about which he casts no judgment. But there is no need at the end of these talks to pretend that you'll speak any sooner than a year or so from that moment, give or take a month. All the plates in your house are from your father's mother. He gave them to you wrapped in newspaper, and they are pale green and very sturdy. Your mother sends you a long letter once or twice a year, usually nonsensical but beautiful, drifting between English and Spanish, including long descriptions of your birth, or the glacier she saw on a recent trip to Alaska, or the invasive species of grass in her garden, or the brief affair she had with her distant cousin when she was 17. Her handwriting is always exquisite. Her ink is always blue. Once it was red, and she apologized for it. You framed some of her letters, creating in your living room a gallery wall of smooth, intricate streams tracing across white or yellow stationery, like maps with no cities, just rivers. Her address is in New Orleans, but you do not think about her when you visit that city, which is at least twice a year because your girlfriend and boyfriend both have best friends who live there, coincidentally. When you write her back, it's always brief, and you include a blurry snapshot of your face. You are svelte and well shorn. You can be bright and kind, but it took a long time for you to realize that those traits wouldn't make anyone actually like you more or less. Of all the bars you manage, you like the one by the harbor the best, despite all the tourists it attracts. You work the late shifts, and when it's closed and the crew is mostly gone, you stare at the water. It is here where your mind becomes its most acrobatic, most macabre and fantastical. You imagine the bodies of the dead in the bottom muck. You imagine sunken boats and cars and guns rusting, breaking down. You imagine sick, rugged, bruised fish, no nonsense and one-eyed. You imagine walking among the fish, joining them, just stepping off the edge and plunging into the water, and the fish swarming you, using the hooks of failed fishermen to snag your skin and drag you down to live in the metallic post-apocalyptic landscape they've created among the skeletons of people and machinery. They will eat you bit by bit, and it won't hurt at all, and you'll just be a few little pieces, feather light and scattered across the waters of the harbor and the Patapsco and the Chesapeake and the Atlantic. And one day you'll rise, evaporate into a cloud, and rain down on anyone who ever said they loved you, cling to their hair and drip down into their ears, explore the thickets and tunnels of their minds for every thought they've ever had of you. You think about this all the time, enough that you'd alarm people if they knew it. You'd like alarming people because it's so unlike you. At the harbor, over the groan of water taxis and the soft night traffic of Baltimore, you also think of the girl on the dock more than a dozen years ago and hundreds of miles away down the coast in northern Florida. Some nights you think, rush me back to the Red River bank and let me tell the girl on the dock that she can't let us steal her tackle box. Let her know that if she lets us take it, she'll let anyone take anything from her. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad.
Thank you.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm Janet Benge, and I'm the chairman of the Kerouac Project of Orlando, and I'm here with Chad Anderson at the end of his residency, which had to come.
I know.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about how you heard about this residency, Chad.
So I was looking, so basically some friends of mine kind of challenged me to start doing more with my creative writing and to look for some residencies and fellowships. So I think I was just doing some Googling, and I also belong to a couple of listservs and newsletters on writing that talk about different opportunities. And so I stumbled upon the Kerouac Project, and it seemed like a really fantastic opportunity to live in a historic house and to skip a DC winter or spring and just have lots of time and space to focus on my craft and developing a project.
Mm-hmm. And what project have you been developing while you're here?
I've been working on a linked short story collection, or a novel in stories. Each story focuses on a different member of the same family, and it spans multiple generations, and it's a very pretty large family. So it's kind of been a pretty big undertaking, and I'm not sure what the final product will end up looking like. It's pretty ambitious right now, so it might not necessarily, it might need to kind of scale back once I get everything written out. But for me right now, it's this time and space is to kind of explore all these different characters and storylines and events in this family's history has been a real blessing and joy. And so I think whatever happens with it, I feel like I'm in a good space for continuing exploring that world, and I have things mapped out and outlined and lots of notes, and about 60% of it sort of drafted, and so that feels really good. Yeah.
Wow. So what kind of work routines did you develop in the house?
I mean, it would vary depending on needs and where I was at, but usually I would kind of try to get started writing or around 10 a.m. and work until basically sunset, so 5:30 or so, and I would move. Sometimes I would work back in Jack Kerouac's old room, which is kind of warm but kind of cozy and small, and so it was really a kind of good space for kind of just huddling down. But then when I felt like I needed a little bit more, I don't know, depending on the character or the piece I was working on or just my mental state of that day, sometimes I would need a little bit more light, so I'd come out here at the table and kind of watch people walk by with their dogs or cars drive past and kind of allow a little light and air and other people kind of populate my mind and the writing. And then sometimes when I was getting a little cabin fever, I would go to a cafe. There's a couple of cafes nearby that I would walk a few blocks to, and so that was really helpful as well. Yeah.
And was there anything that surprised you when you actually got here about Orlando or College Park or the vibe here?
Yeah, I mean, everyone has been very friendly and welcoming. So for everyone from the Jack Kerouac Project board and the friends of the house to several of the neighbors who invited me over for just for snacks and for glasses of wine. People. There's lots of the people in the cafes, and there's been a couple of restaurant and bars that I've really liked to go to, and people there have been sort of just really friendly and striking up conversation and taking an interest in what I'm doing here in Orlando. So I think that not that I was necessarily expecting people to be unfriendly, but I think, you know, coming from
New York.
DC, coming from DC, which can be a very friendly place, but it's, other times people are very busy and just kind of focused on getting to the next thing. And so there was a little bit of that southern kind of hospitality here. The thing that surprised me, and I think we've talked about this before, is the idea that the whole Orlando is much bigger and very different from Disney and the Disney World and Universal Studios and all of that. And so, you know, I think I was expecting a lot more kind of like Mickey Mouse spaces and windows and like Cinderella memorabilia and that kind of thing.
Okay.
Throughout, but it wasn't, and you can pretty much spend your whole time in the city and not really have to go anywhere near Disney or have, you know, a lot to do with it. And I did spend a little bit of time at Universal Studios, which was kind of fun with John King. But besides that, you know, discovering Orlando for Orlando and its great food scene, its great literary scene and storytelling scene, great music scene. So there's just like a lot going on here that makes the city worth sort of visiting and spending time with, and beyond just Disney.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, yes, you actually have to make an effort to go down the other end
You
of
really
town.
do. You really do.
If you want to wear your Mickey Mouse ears and not look weird.
Exactly.
Yeah, as an adult anyway. So how did you prepare to come down here? You're not a full-time writer.
Right.
So
Yeah. So I think so my day job, or my 9-to-5 job, which is often not 9 to 5, it's often longer than that. But I'm a writer and editor for a contractor in DC that does international development project implementation. And so, you know, I was very grateful, and I was able to get a leave of absence from the company, Chemonics, and they were very kind and gracious and supportive of this experience. So I was able to do that, and then I just kind of had to sublet my apartment and, you know, type a lot of loose ends and figure out how insurance would work, and then, you know, take a little bit of time also to think about, I mean, I didn't want to be kind of limited and block myself in terms of like a project, but I also didn't want to come here and suddenly just sort of like, okay, I have time to write. So I think just kind of getting some initial ideas and even leading up months that summer and fall leading up to my to the winter residency, I thought a lot about what I wanted to do and what projects felt like I needed this kind of space and time to explore and play. And so this project, so getting some outlines and kind of getting a, you know, family tree and an outline and, you know, character sketches and outlines and that sort of thing ready in my notebook was really kind of helpful in preparing to come.
And what kind of advice would you have for anybody who might be thinking of applying for the residency?
Oh, that's really great. Just do it. Just do it. It's a fantastic responsibility and opportunity. But I think that, and also, I mean, this is something that I don't know if it's necessarily an advice but I mean, just to do it and to send your best work and to not second guess yourself. But this might be both something to learn both before and while you're here, but kind of learn sort of who you are and as a writer and understanding balance for yourself. So I think that I learned most here was listening to my gut and my body and my mind in terms of when I need to push myself and lock myself away and get to that next page. And, you know, sometimes there were days when I had plans, you know, to go out that evening or go grab dinner or coffee or something. And then I got this like surge of ideas and I was like, oh great, those are great ideas. I'll put them on the shelf and I'll get back to them tomorrow morning. But then tomorrow morning would come and the ideas might still be there, but they felt kind of stale and it was kind of laborious to work through them. And so just being able to take that time and to push plans back or to you know, make a change and spend some time with those ideas and write them down and get those out is really something I had to learn, both before I came and while I was here. And then on the other hand, on the other side of things is also to learn when to put down the pen or to close the computer and take that walk or go hang out and see other people, eat something, just taking time for yourself and exploring the city. And I think oftentimes when the writing seemed the most difficult for me was when I was neglecting some other aspect of myself. Like I needed to go for a jog, or I needed to, text a friend, or call my parents, or just again get out for coffee or drink or something with someone. So learning when you need to do that, and kind of listening to yourself, so that you can be the best writer.
Because it is a long chunk of time to be alone, isn't it? Have you ever been alone for
I don't think that. I think
3
this
months?
is probably the most kind of alone that I've been. And it was at once very, very good and very satisfying, and also very challenging. And I learned a lot about myself and things that ways I get distracted, ways that insecurities, things that I thought were like other people's fault, but actually are still just my own. Just like
they're still with you.
Yeah, I brought my baggage with me to Orlando.
Oh, darn.
And so but I think it's just really helpful to be able to spend that much time and just be with yourself. And sometimes you can get in your head too much, but I think at the same time you often learn a lot about yourself, and you get comfortable being alone. And I think that's rare these days. And that's something that I think that I've been grateful for. And in addition to the time to work on my writing, it's also time to kind of be with myself and figure out who Chad is by himself. And so that's been a really great experience.
Well, I'm glad to hear it, and I want to thank you. You've been a wonderful resident.
Thank you. I'm very grateful.
We've really enjoyed having you and your participation in things and your writing. We're looking forward to seeing something come out at some stage.
Absolutely.
And we invite you to come back for a book signing.
Oh, absolutely, in a heartbeat.
And we'll be right there on the porch doing that book signing, hopefully. Yeah, so all the best with your future, and please stay in touch.
Thank you so much. I certainly will. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.